Okay, let's go ahead and get started here. I'm going to be working primarily through Lightroom today. And before we get started, I want to make sure to note that printing from Resize is not possible. Resize is a prepping program. It's there to help you get your images ready, but it's not there to print your images out. So you are going to most likely be working through a program like Lightroom. You can work with Lightroom, Aperture, Elements, or Photoshop. It doesn't matter. If you have another program that you like to use, awesome. But Resize really is just there to help you get ready to print your image. And then a program like Lightroom is there to actually do the printing process. And the printing process is going to be a little bit different per program. Lightroom, it's very easy. There's a little print module. It's going to be the same in Aperture, which is great. And then through Elements in Photoshop, you just have a print dialog box, which is wonderful. So the actual printing process is not what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about Resize and getting those photos prepped to go. Now, I've got my image open here in Lightroom. And if you're going through a program like Lightroom, or Aperture, I suggest that you right-click on your image and go to the Edit In or Edit with Plugin menu. Now, the reason why we're doing that here through Lightroom is because when I click Perfect Resize from this drop-down menu, it gives me the ability to edit a copy with my Lightroom adjustments. One of the things that we're going to be doing today to this image is we're going to be upsizing it. When I bring it into Resize, I'll talk to you about resolution and size and all that fun stuff, but this image is not very big. If I print it at the resolution it's at right now, I can maybe print it 5:7, which is not a very large photo. So I want to be able to make this just a little bit bigger and do a couple of other things in the process of getting it ready to print. One of the things that I suggest is that you edit a copy of your image. Prepping your photos for print is going to be one of the last things that you do to your images. So if I've made any the portrait. So if I've made any portrait adjustments, if I took this in a perfect portrait, if I took this into perfect black and white or perfect effects to get some sort of stylizing technique, if I went in and added textures and borders and lots of different things like that, I want to make sure that I create a duplicate of that file because this will just be my print image. This is going to be the photo that I get ready to print. And because I'm going to be adjusting things like resolution and size, I want to make sure that I can always go back to my original smaller image just in case I do something that I don't like. So if you're working through Photoshop or Elements, you can duplicate your files, and through Lightroom and Aperture, you have an automatic option for creating a copy of your original image so that you don't have to worry about destroying it. So I suggest that you create a copy, and this will be your special, just print-only version. And I find that very helpful. It makes my workflow go a little bit easier because I know what I'm going to be printing and what I'm not going to be printing. So just a little note about that. Now I'm going to edit the copy with my Lightroom adjustments, and we're going to go ahead and click OK. And now we're going to jump into Perfect Resize. Now, the first thing that we want to do here is we want to take a look at our document size. On the right-hand side of the screen, these are going to be the panes that we're mostly working with today. And right up at the top are your pixel dimensions and your document size. I'm going to open them both up so that we can see them here. Underneath the document size, right up at the top, there's your width, your height, and your resolution. This is the information about this image when we open it up. We've done absolutely nothing to this photo. So this is the original resolution, width, and height for this individual photo. I always like to make sure I check this when I bring my image into Perfect Resize. I want to know what I'm working with. Now, this photo is quite a bit smaller, I'm suspecting, than a lot of images that other people might work with. There are a lot of people out there who are using pretty big, pretty bulky cameras nowadays, and they have tons of pixel information in there. And your photos are probably going to be quite a bit larger than this. This is quite a small file here. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring it in here, so that I could show you how to upsize pretty effectively. And that really is the main purpose of Resize, is to resize your image and upsize. It works great on smaller images like this one. It works great on larger images if you want to make them really big. So it's got lots of juice to it, and you can use it for tons of different photos, but this is such a great example of this. So you'll see with the width and a height, I have basically about 7 by 5 inches, which is, again, not a very large photo. I can adjust how I'd like to view the width and the height, just in case. There are these little drop-down menus here. There's inches, along with things like centimeters, points, picas. It depends on what you're working with and what you like to be able to view. Depending on where you live, we're here in the United States, we use inches. There are quite a few people in places like Canada who are going to be using centimeters. So it's just a difference of where you live and what you're interested in using this for. But I like to leave it in inches because that's how all of my paper is measured. So I like to know what size of photo I'm looking at. Now, here inside this document size pane, we want to be able to resize our photo. There are lots of different ways that we can do that. The first is just by typing in a new width and height. It seems a little too straightforward to work, but that is exactly how this program works. You can type in a new width and height. It does its special algorithm of upsizing. There's an algorithm called genuine fractals, and that's what's being used in this program to upsize. And it's just going to do all of its magic and poof, upsize your image. And that's why Resize is so great. It's so easy to use. So I want to make this image quite a bit bigger. I can go ahead and we'll type in a new width or height. So I want the height of my image to be 20 inches, let's say. I'll just go ahead and type in 20, and it will automatically readjust my width along with my height. Now, the reason why it does that is because of this box right here. It's called Constrain Proportions, and I'm kind of clicking right next to it so you can see it. You want to make sure that this box has been checked. What that does is it makes sure that the proportions of the image are going to stay the same when you upsize it. If you change anything in this photo, it won't squish it or make it look really weird. It's going to constrain the proportions. So if you're doing any quick upsizing in the document size pane, you want to make sure that that box is checked so that you don't ruin the proportions of your image. Now, it's already gone through and it's upsized my image. You can't really see much of a difference, which is exactly the point. A lot of people sometimes get frustrated when they look at perfect resize and they're looking at their photos and they're like, nothing changed. Well, that's the point. You don't want anything to change. You want your image to look the same no matter what size it is. This image is now 20 inches by 28 inches, and it looks just the way it should look, which is fantastic. Now, there are lots of other ways that we can resize here inside Perfect Resize to get our images ready. 20 by 28 is not an exceptionally normal size. There aren't a lot of paper types out there that you're going to see 20 by 28. So there's another way that we can resize here in the document size pane, and it's underneath the preset drop-down menu. These are all of the different presets that you have access to apply to your image. There are different sizes, if you will, that you can adjust your photo to. So if you have an image like this one, that's kind of a strange size, 20 by 28. Technically, we could print this at about 5 by 7, which would be good, but it's going to be a little bit easier here if I can just scroll through and find a size that I'm looking for. So we have everything from square sizes. We have video-based sizes if you need something to fit into a video that you might be producing and you want to put it in like a slideshow style thing. We have panoramic sizes. We have kind of these strange no crop sizes which pop up a lot. Then we also have basic photo sizes, things like 4 by 5, 5 by 7, 8 by 10. And we also have specific paper sizes. And this is really great if you know that you have a specific paper type that you use. So I use a paper size called 17 inches by 22 inches. That's my favorite. It fits perfectly on my printer. It's big enough to look, nice, but it's also not so huge that it's unmanageable. So I print on 17 by 22. That's my favorite size. And it's here inside this paper menu. And you'll see you've got tons of other different sizes you can choose from. So for this, I'm just going to scroll over and let's choose 17 by 22. Now, the important thing to note about choosing a size from this preset menu is that it's going to pop a crop box on your image. Even if it doesn't have to crop your photo down, it's going to put a crop box on there anyways, just in case you're going to have to. For this image, I'm going to have to cut off the sides just a little bit. This photo is a little too long. I need to squish it in just a tad to make it fit into that 17 by 22 size. On the right-hand side in the document size pane, you can adjust the width and height more here if you want to, but I've chosen that size for a specific reason, so I'm good. Now, if I want to, I can go through and I can move my crop box around just by clicking and dragging in the preview area. I want to make sure that I get a little bit more space on the right-hand side. And there we go. We've resized our image. Now, up in the top right-hand corner, you have a reset button, which I'm going to click. You can reset everything back to scratch just in case you make any adjustments you don't like. Another way that you can access the exact same preset drop-down menu is just by jumping over to your crop tool. It's automatically selected on the left-hand side of your screen, and up in the tool options bar, you have your preset drop-down menu. This is the exact same one that we just saw. So you don't have to worry about not being able to access this menu in one place or the other. It's in the crop tool and it's in the document size pane. So we make it nice and easy for you to find it. Now, let's say that you're working with a strange size, one that you don't find in the preset drop-down menu. And let's say that there's a paper that you really like that isn't in this list. Or you're printing all of your images out at a very specific size that you don't see. And that's pretty typical when people are doing large prints. They want a specific size. Let's say they're working on a panoramic image and you're not going to find it in the panoramic folder. It's not really working for you. So we have a way around that. It's underneath our custom menu right here. So if you go up to your preset menu and you scroll down to custom, there's an option called Manage Custom Sizes. When I click on this, it opens up a dialog box, and this is a way for you to add a new preset of your very own. And this could be one that you use again on a regular basis. All you do is click the Add button down at the bottom of the screen. It's going to place in just an untitled preset for you, and you can just double click any of these to adjust them. Now, really quickly, just so I can show this to you, it places the width and the height of the image that you have on your screen into the width and height boxes. All you do is just double click to change them. So if I have a piece of paper that's 17 by 22 inches, I don't want to print it all the way out to the edge. I want to make sure that I've got an image that has a nice border around the edge. So I'm actually going to make it 15 by 20 inches. And I'm just typing in 15 by 20 in here. You'll see that I can adjust my units if I want to. So I have inches selected, but again, you can choose another one if you want to. And then we'll go ahead and give it a name. We want to call it 15 by 20 inches. And now I'll be able to remember what this is. I'll go ahead and just click OK. Now to apply this custom preset, we'll just go back up to our preset drop-down menu, scroll down to custom, and there is 15 by 20. I have this size now logged in. I can adjust my image accordingly, and we're good to go. So it's very easy to add in the sizes that you want. I know a lot of people ask that question, and a lot of people always want to know how to add a custom size because they have papers that are special. A lot of people are printing on some very strange papers nowadays, which is really fun, but sometimes the sizes don't pop up here. So that's a really good way to build your own, which I think is really fun. And you can be very, very specific. So it doesn't have to just be a straight 15 by 22. It could be 15.5 by 22.25. So you can go wild with the sizes, which is great. All right, we're going to reset this again, and I'm going to go back over to my document size pane. Now, the next thing that I want to talk to you about is resolution. I'm actually going to go ahead and type in a new width and height here to make our image a little bit bigger. We're going to do that same 20 by 28, which will come back in just a second. So, all right, so resolution is very important. These are the amount of pixels that are in your image. Every photo is made up of pixels, these little tiny squares. They're specific colors and tones that build an entire photo. And it's really fascinating to be able to see pixels and kind of understand how they interact and how they work together. Resolution is the amount of pixels per inch per centimeter in your photo. Now, on the right-hand side, there's a pixels/inch drop-down menu here. And you can adjust this pixels per inch or pixels per centimeter. I'm going to leave it at inches. Now, right now, the resolution is set to something called 300. That means that there are 300 pixels per every single inch in this photo. That is a ton of pixels. If we scroll up to our pixel dimensions, you can see that the width and height of this photo is 6,000 pixels by 8,400 pixels. That's huge. That's a ton of information in there. That is thousands upon thousands. That's millions of pixels. That's good when you're getting your image ready to print. The smaller the resolution, the more obvious the pixels are going to be. Now, when you're looking on a computer screen, it can only register so many pixels per inch. If I adjust the resolution here in front of you, you're not going to see a difference because I'm on a computer. When you print your images out, you're going to be able to tell a larger difference between resolution changes. Now, you hear people throw around the word resolution pretty often, and it's something that I think a lot of people get confused by. But I really do, at least for me anyways, I find it visually easier to understand by being able to see that there are 300 pixels in every single inch of this photo. And that helps me realize that the more pixels there are, the more detailed the image is going to be. The lower the resolution, the more pixelated and funky the photo is going to look. When you're getting your image ready to print, resolution is obviously going to be very important. I'm going to open up, there's a drop-down menu here that's attached to the resolution. And it actually has, we've got a whole bunch of options for you here to help make things go a little bit easier. When you're getting an image ready for the web, you're going to use something called 72 pixels per inch. You don't need anything larger than that. You won't be able to tell a difference. 72 pixels per inch is perfect for getting your images ready for computers, websites, and so on. For placing your images up on things like your blog, on Facebook, on Twitter, whatever it might be, 72 is good. A lot of photos that you have may start out at 72 pixels per inch. Maybe you were shooting on JPEGs on a smaller camera, and your resolution is 72. You want to be able to upsize that. This is the menu that you're going to go to upsize your resolution. Now, mine is already at 300 pixels per inch, which is perfect. That's a ton of information in there, and that's what we want. We want a ton of pixels. We want as much information as we can cram in there. Now, there are a couple of other sizes here that are good to note. General photo printing is 300 pixels per inch, and that's good if you're sending your photos out to labs, if you've got other people printing them for you, if you have just a basic photo printer, if you're printing sizes that are, I guess, small-ish, like 8x10 to larger sizes. I've printed 300 pixels per inch on images that go all the way up to about 20 by 30 inches, and it looks great. So you have a nice range that you can print your images at 300 pixels per inch. There are a couple of other ones here. If you're doing very large format printing, and when I say large, I mean big, like huge poster big, billboard size big, enormous big. You don't need quite as many pixels per inch. Not only does it weigh the size of the file down, which can be really annoying, but also when you're looking at a very, very large print, you're not looking at it up close. You're standing back quite a few feet. And you're not going to be paying attention to the fact that there are 60 less pixels per inch or 100 less pixels per inch. Most billboards are actually printed at 100 pixels per inch. If you walked right up to them, you would actually be able to see some of the pixels. But you're not doing that because it's a giant billboard, hopefully not right next to you in your car, because that would be really terrifying. It's up, high away, and you see it as you drive past. So most billboards and those large format prints are actually done at a very, very small resolution because they're not meant to be looked at that close. So you can get away with a very small resolution, and it doesn't hurt the imagery and it doesn't hurt the effect. So just know that there are lots of different ways that you can choose your resolution here. I'm going to leave it at 300. If you want to change your resolution, all you need to do is just click on another option and it will adjust accordingly. There's nothing strange that's going to happen to your image. It's going to resample and try and help make sure that it pulls in as much information as possible. So if you're going from a smaller number like 72 up to a larger number like 240, the image will look a little bit different, but not a lot. It's just putting more pixels in there to give more and more information to the photo. Now, when you're getting your images ready for printing, there are a couple other things that are important to note. The first is something called sharpening. And sharpening is Sharpening can get confusing sometimes, and I know that that's a little frustrating. Sharpening is very, very important when you're getting your images ready to print out. And it's one of those things that is so crucial, and I think some people forget this step or don't really understand what it is. So I thought maybe a little explanation might help. Sharpening is edge contrast. That's all it is. It's looking at your photo. I'm actually going to zoom into my image just a little bit so that we can get a closer look at the edges in our photo here. And it helps because they have glasses on, which have nice, very specific edges. He's got lines in his hair. There are lines in all of the leaves in the background. What sharpening is paying attention to are all of the edge pixels in your image. So it's looking at the line on her glasses. It's looking at all of the lines in between the strands of his hair. It's looking at all of the little hairs on his beard, the edges around all of these different leaves and ivy in the background, all of those little fine details that have a difference of tone. Those are the edges that sharpening is paying attention to. Now, it's not actually making your photo look sharper in a sense that it's refocusing your image. It's adding contrast to all of these little tiny details to make it appear as though your photo is sharper. The reason why sharpening is so important is that pretty much all photos nowadays, when they get printed out straight from camera onto your computer and onto your printer, they lose detail, they lose information. It's typical, it's something that happens with printers, and there isn't really a huge way around it as far as the printing goes. But if you print out an image straight without sharpening it, sometimes the photos look a little flat. They look a little fuzzy, and they can look a little dull. Sharpening is a way for you to pump your image back up, bring back the crispness without going overboard. So there are a couple different ways that you can sharpen here inside Perfect Resize. Most of these options are going to be the same if you want to sharpen in other places. So if you were in Perfect Effects and you sharpened, you don't need to resharpen. And that's the same for black and white as well, or enhance. If you sharpen in another program, you don't want to do it twice. What I recommend is that you only sharpen when you're getting your images ready to print. Leave sharpening alone until you're finally ready to print your images out, because it really is a last step. You want to do it after you've done everything else. Now, here in Resize, it's a little pane, which you can turn on. There are a couple different types of sharpening. We can talk about them, but I want to start out using one called progressive. And progressive sharpening is really pretty fantastic. It's like smart sharpening your image. It is an amazing algorithm. It goes through and it pays attention to all of those edges. It's very smart about how intense it's going to add sharpening to your image. It does a great job of avoiding areas that you don't want to over sharpen. It really is one of the best options. Now, there's one slider right up at the top. It's just the amount slider. If I drop this all the way down to 0, you can see that our image softens quite a bit, a little too much. If I take the amount slider and I move it over to the right, it adds contrast to those edges and makes the photo appear as though it's crisper. Now with progressive, you want to be really careful. You don't want to go overboard. If we go too far, you'll see that it's also sharpening things like the freckles on his face as well as the lines on his face, the pores on her skin, some of the shadows that are on the leaves. It's starting to look kind of funky. So you want to keep the amount as low as possible. I typically, with the progressive sharpening, especially on portraits, I keep it really low. I keep it like under 20 low. I find it adds just enough crispness. I can turn this on and off so you can see that before and after, but this is our original image, little soft. This is with just a very, very small amount of sharpening. You don't want to print your images out and have someone look at it and go, wow, you really sharpened that image, didn't you? You don't want it to look obvious. You want it to be very subtle. So keep progressive pretty low so that you don't go overboard. Now, what's really great about all of these different types of sharpening is that we also have these sliders down at the bottom, and this is your protect section. We actually build this into the sharpening tool so that you can protect your highlights and shadows from over sharpening. I'm going to drop these all the way down to 0 here. Now, to use them, if you have a photo like this where you've got some highlights and some shadows, they're There's some pretty dark shadows underneath some of these leaves that are up against the wall, and then there are a couple of brighter highlights up on his forehead. If I take the shadow slider and we move it over to the right quite a bit, it's going to go through and it's going to soften a little bit of the sharpening that's happening in some of these darker tones so that we don't add edge contrast where we don't need it. And we can do the same for the highlights as well. It's not going to be a huge, crazy noticeable difference, but it's going to be enough that it saves some of the information that we didn't want to lose. So you have these protect sliders with all the different other types of sharpening, and you want to make sure that you utilize them as much as possible because it can really save a photo. Now, the other type of sharpening I want to talk about is unsharp mask. And it's a little bit different than progressive sharpening because you have one other slider down here, and it's the radius slider. With the edge contrast that it's applying, there's a radius around those edges that it's applying the contrast to. The smaller the radius, the more specific it will be. The larger the radius, the wider the area of contrast is around those edges, and the stranger it's going to look. So I'm going to take my mount slider, and we're going to pump it up so that you can see the difference between a smaller radius and a larger one. We're going to drop this down to 1 right here. You'll see that the sharpening softens quite a bit. It's still there, but it's a little bit more pinpoint around the lines in the photo. Watch areas like his hair and the edges of the glasses here as I push the radius up to 4. Look at that haloing effect that happens when you pump this all the way up to a radius of 4. Not only has this gotten sharper, but we've made the image start to look a little weird. That contrast that's applying has these very strange dark blacks, as well as these very strange bright highlights. It's making the photo look like it's kind of a fake HDR, but like really badly done. You really want to be careful with the radius slider. I almost always keep it at 1 or 2, as low as I possibly can get it so that I don't go overboard. And then I can adjust my amount slider accordingly. You'll also have your protect sections down at the bottom so that you can protect your tones, and you'll be good to go. Let's go ahead and zoom out here. I'm going to take a look at our whole image. Now, sharpening is obviously very crucial, and it's one of those things that you're going to want to do to your images. This same dialogue, again, is going to be in Effects, Black and White, and Enhance. If you want to sharpen your photos in different places, I do still suggest you do it here in Resize just because it's a one-stop shop for getting your images ready to print, and your photos don't need to be sharpened unless they're getting ready for print. So you don't have to worry about it until you're prepping your photos. Now, along with the pixel dimensions and the document size, we've talked about sharpening. The next things that I want to talk to you about are tilings and gallery wraps. And these are the last two kind of final things that you're going to do to your images when you're prepping them. Tiling is one of those ones that is sometimes strange to explain, but it's such a cool thing to be able to do to your photos that I really love talking about it. It's an amazing tool to have access to here, and it saves a lot of worry when you're trying to get your images to your printer. One of the things that can happen, you'll see that this image, the width and height for this photo is 20 by 28 inches. That's a pretty large photo for a lot of people out there. Most people have printers that can't necessarily print that wide or that tall. They've got printers that stop at 8 by 10, 11 by 17, or 11 by 14. 16 by 20 sometimes is the widest that people can print. And this may be a bigger size than my printer can handle. Let's say I only have a printer that prints 8 by 10. And that's pretty typical. A lot of people have smaller little compact printers nowadays, which is really great. But if you want to print larger, you're not really doing so hot. Tiling is a way for you to save an image, be able to print it out at a larger size, but in more manageable tiles of your original image. It literally cuts down your photo into pieces. So I'm going to go ahead and turn tiling on. It's going to place these cyan guidelines over your image. Anything that's inside these little rectangles here is a singular tile. Now, there are your width and your height. Those are the width and the height of the tiles that you're going to print out. Now, right now it's set to 8 by 10. Now, the 10 works perfectly. the height of each one of these tiles is 10. The height of my image is 20. So you'll see that my tiles fit perfectly. There's one row on top and one row on the bottom. Awesome. But the width of the tiles, 8, doesn't really go into the width of my original image, 28. It looks kind of funky, and now we've got this weird half tile that's just like sitting there, and it's very strange. One of the things about using the tiling is that you're going to have to do a little bit of math here. So I need to find a size that fits well into 20 by 28. Now I already did the math earlier when I was thinking about this, and 5 by 7 works perfectly inside the width and height of 20 by 28. So I can just readjust my tile size right here. Let's say we want the width to be 7 inches, and then we want the height to be 5 inches. Let's go ahead and type in 5. And now I have these perfectly sized tiles. I have four columns and 4 rows, all by 5 by 7. They've been cut down really nicely. I know how to fit them into my image. When I print them out, if you're printing out images that are tiled, you have tons of different ways for re-putting them back together. I put mine on like a thick kind of gator board or foam board. You can even put them on things like cardboard, anything that's easy to mount your images on. And you can use kind of an adhesive, spray adhesive, and you can actually fit your images back together to really make them look like they're a full photo. This is also a really great tool if you're working on panoramic images. So if you need to cut a photo in half, let's say it's a perfect height, but it's a very long photo, you can adjust your tile size that way. So let's say that the height of my image, we want to keep that the same. We'll leave it at 20. But we want the width to be half of the width of my original photo, which is 14. So I'm just going to go ahead and type in 14. And now I have just my photo split in half. And now it's going to be a lot easier for me to print this photo out. If you have panoramas, you may have to print them out in larger chunks here. So you may have to cut them down into 3 or 4 spots. But as you can see, it's very, very easy to tile your images down. Now, what's important about tiling is you'll see down at the bottom there's an output section, and this is very important. Output refers to the tiles that it's going to print out. It's actually saving them into separate files. You'll see right up at the top there is tile count 2, which means there are 2 different tiles we're going to print out, one on the left and one on the right. They're each going to be 20 by 14 inches here. I can choose the file type. I'm going to select TIFF. I want my tiles to be TIFF files. And then I can select a location that I want them to be in. So you can place your new tiles and save them on your desktop, into your original photo folder, whatever they need to be. If I click apply, it's going to export my image into 2 separate photos. So it doesn't keep them all in one same file. It actually separates them down to make it even easier to print out. You basically can do bulk printing in programs like Aperture and Lightroom. You can actually do bulk printing through Elements really, really easily, and you can do it through Photoshop. It's just a little bit more difficult. So you can open all of those files and you can just print them all out one right after the other, all with the same settings, all at the same size. So this is a really cool option. Now, if you don't want to do a lot of math, which I do not judge you for not wanting to do a lot of math, inside this pane on the right-hand side, you can see that the width and height of our tiles that we're creating are inches. So we had to actually come up with an inch number. Mine was 7 by 5. And I had all of these little nice tiles that fit perfectly. But if you have a strange size that you're having a hard time trying to figure out what your tiles are going to be, if you open up the inches drop-down menu, you can go down to the bottom and choose columns. It'll automatically change the width and height to X amount of columns and X amount of rows. And you can just type in a new number. So right now it's set to 3 by 3. My tiles are going to be kind of funky sizes. My height tiles are going to be like 6.7, and my width tiles are going to be even weirder. They're going to be like 8 point something. But now I don't have to worry about trying to figure out that perfect size. So let's say that I wanted a width of 4 tiles and we wanted a height of 3. Now my tiles are a little bit closer to squares. That's perfect. That's exactly what I want. This is way easier to deal with. Now the last option that's here in the tiling pane is also called overlap. And this is also very important. This gives you the ability to create tiles that have a little bit of image overlap. Let's go ahead and type in 1 inch in the overlap dialog and you'll see what happens. It places now extra cyan lines. Anywhere that's inside these little smaller strips, these are going to be printed out on multiple different pages. So this corner tile on the top right is going to print all the way out to here. So all the way out on this larger line that I'm kind of clicking on and going over. The neighboring tile to the left of it is going to print all the way out over here. So this little strip that's right in the middle is going to be printed out on 2 different tiles. Then when I print my photos out and I want to put them back together, the overlap will make sure that I didn't lose any information in the process. You can trim the overlap after you get it out of the printer. You can trim it in other ways, but I find that overlap can be very helpful if you want to be extremely specific about putting your photos back together. Overlap works best when you're working with columns and rows. Sometimes it doesn't work quite as well when you're working with a specific inch number or size. So if you're working with an overlap and you want to have that extra little edge, I suggest you work with columns and rows. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and we're going to turn our tiling off because the last one that I want to talk to you about is your gallery wrap pane. Now, when you're creating a gallery wrap, I'm going to go ahead and turn this on. You're going to see those little cyan guidelines are going to pop up. Gallery wraps are meant for when you're printing your photos out on things like canvas and wrapping them around these little wooden bars. When you print out a canvas, if you flip the canvas over, there are these 4 little wooden panels that basically get stapled together, and that's what creates the base for a canvas. When you print an image out or you stretch a canvas over those wooden bars, there's a little bit of overlap around each edge of a painting or a photo. If you leave that edge white, it can drop off and look very fake. It can look really weird. A lot of painters actually print on the edges of their canvases. Sometimes unknowingly, they just kind of slip and paint ends up on there. A lot of photographers, when they print out on canvas, they like to make sure that their image is still around the edges of that canvas so it doesn't look quite so fake. It also makes sure that the viewer's eyes aren't paying attention to a weird white strip around the photo. You don't want that, so you want to make sure that you've got a little bit of information there. That's what the gallery wrap pane does. It gives you that little excess that's going to be wrapped around those wooden bars. It's very easy to use. All you need to do is choose the thickness, the amount that you want to be added to each edge. So I have it set to 2 inches, but let's say I need at least 4 on there. Now, there are also different types. What it's doing is it's reflecting my original image. So you can see that her hair, his hands, all of the leaves right there have just been automatically reflected. And it's actually really cool when you look at it, but it's not exactly what I'm looking for. If it were a very, very small amount that I needed, if it was only 1 inch, which I can swap it to, the reflection isn't going to make that much of a difference. But when I change that thickness up to 4 and I can start seeing their hands, I can start seeing her hair, that's when it starts to look kind of weird. So if you open up the type drop-down menu, you've got a couple different options here. And my favorite is stretch or stretch soft. So I'm going to start out with stretch. And all it does is it reflects your image, but it stretches out the pixels a bit. I like stretch soft because it adds a very subtle blur. Then when I print the image out, there isn't going to be some very sharp, crisp area around the edges of my image. The center of my photo is going to be the only thing in focus there. And then the edges will still have the same color. They'll still have a little bit of the same information from my original photo, but it's going to be faded out and softer. It's going to look a lot better. So I suggest you use one of those 2 options, stretch or stretch soft. There's also a reflect soft if you want to keep the image a little less stretchy and weird. And that's also a really great option. So you can choose which one works best for you. And then from here, the last thing that you can do is you can also add an overlay color. Right now it's set to black. And if I take the opacity and move that over to the right, it just darkens the edges a little bit as well. And again, brings your focus into your central image. When I'm adding a gallery wrap, I typically don't add an overlay color unless the photo is really, really, really bright or really, really, really dark. Sometimes I find that adjusting a little bit of the intense tone of the edges can help bring your eyes, again, closer to the center. But for the most part, images like this, it would work perfectly if I just add that soft blur, print it out, and it's going to look just great. So you have all of those different options in the gallery wrap pane if you need it, just depending on what type of image you're working on. Now, the last thing that I want to make sure I note, I'm actually going to go ahead and we are going to reset everything here, and we're going to start out from scratch. I threw a lot of information at you guys, and there's a ton of stuff here inside Perfect Resize to do. If you don't really know where to start, and you don't really want to do a lot of the manual options that we just talked about, you have some presets on the left-hand side. These are on-one presets. We include these in the suite when you get it, so you don't have to download them or do anything like that. And this is a great way to get started if you don't really want to spend the time making custom presets, trying to add gallery wraps, adding sharpening, depending on what your printer is. Sharpening is going to be different for the printers and the papers that you use, which is frustrating. The presets are there to help. All you do is choose what type of printer you're working with, or if you're working through a photo lab, we've got some general sizes and general sharpening amounts that you can add. I like to print on an Epson printer, and I typically print on matte paper. So I'm going to open up that category, and here are a whole bunch of Epson matte sizes. They include not only document size changes, so the width and height of your image, they also include resolution changes depending on what your photo's original resolution is, and they include setting adjustments and sharpening adjustments. If you're working with any of the canvas categories, you'll see that there's Epson Canvas up here as well. They'll also add a gallery wrap on top of everything else. So you have tons of different ways that you can resize. So for me, I know that I want to print this image out pretty big. Let's say I want to print it out 20 by 30. I'm going to click Epson Map 20 by 30. It's going to go through, add a crop box to my image. It's going to adjust my document size and my resolution. You'll see my resolution is now at 240. It added sharpening, and it adjusted the settings. It did a whole bunch of stuff all in one fell swoop. Now all I need to do is click and drag my crop box into place and click apply when I'm ready to go. The sharpening will be specific to the paper and the printer, so the sharpening is going to be a little bit different with the Epson matte category than it's going to be with the HP canvas category, so do know that that changes there. It's also going to be a little different if you go through the photo lab category. There's a little less intense sharpening, so your photos don't end up overly sharpened because you're not 100% sure what type of printer you're using. But the photo lab options can be really great if you don't know and you're sending your photos out to places like Costco or Walgreens or CVS, or there are tons of different convenience stores and places that do printing nowadays. So places like Target and Walmart do printing, and you can just send your photos out. So if you want to upsize your photos, try out that photo lab category, and that's always a really good place to start out. All right, you guys, I have been talking at you for quite a while. We started probably about 1 minute after 1, so I've actually been talking at you for about 45 minutes. So I'm suspecting there are probably some questions that popped up. If there's anything that you guys want to know, please feel free to ask me right now. I love answering your questions because you guys always have good ones. Really quickly, before any of you guys leave too, I'm going to pop up our website. This webinar will actually be up online. If you jump over to ononesoftware.com to our webinars page, it's just ononesoftware.com/webinars. Up in the top right-hand corner, there's our archived webinars page. We actually record a lot of these and we place them up online. This one was recorded and will be up online really soon. When you jump over here, you'll see that there are tons of other ones that you can access if you want to watch them, including one that we had a couple weeks ago with Matt Kliskowski. A couple weeks before that, we had one with Jacob Lucas, and so on. We're getting up a lot of new ones that are specific to new things in Perfect Photo Suite 8, which is really fun. We haven't had a Resize webinar in a while, so we want to put this up online too. So just in case you guys want to rewatch it, just jump over to our webinars page here and click on archived webinars in the top right-hand corner. You can also take a look at any of our upcoming webinars. We've got some for the rest of the week. We're going to be posting more for next week today as well. So keep your eye out there so that you can watch some of those webinars with us. All right, let me answer some of those questions for you guys. Okay. The first question is printing being added to Perfect Photo Suite 8? No, it's not. If you own Perfect Photo Suite 8, you cannot print from it and you will not be able to print from it. However, it is on our list of things to do. Just know that that is one of our, we have a long list of priorities of things that we want to put into the photo suite, and printing is really, really high up on that list, like right up at the top. Printing is really important, and a lot of people want to be able to have this as a complete workflow option. So not only finding your images through Browse, but editing, finishing them off, and printing them. So you will be able to have that option. It's just not going to be in Suite 8. We have a couple of other things that we want to finish out for Suite 8, and printing isn't going to come. But know that that's going to be out with our next big iteration of the Perfect Photo Suite, because so many people want to be able to print. So it's coming, just not quite yet. All right. If you use sharpening and Perfect Effects, do you need to sharpen and resize? No, you don't. Again, I do suggest you sharpen and resize when you're getting your images ready to print. The only time that I would sharpen outside of resize is when you need to do something called selective sharpening. What selective sharpening is you add a sharpening layer to your photo, and then you paint out the areas that you don't want to sharpen. This is not something that happens very often. It's not a very typical thing that people do to their images. It's very selective to the photos. I think maybe 5-10% of the time I do selective sharpening. That's when using a program like Perfect Effects would be really useful for sharpening, or sharpening in a program like Photoshop, so that you could sharpen on a separate layer and then paint in and out the areas that you want. But other than that, you don't want to double sharpen. So if you're sharpening in Enhance, Effects, or Black and White, do not resharpen and resize. Also, the other thing that's important to note about sharpening here is if you're upsizing your image. So if you're taking a photo like this one that was originally 5:7 and you're enlarging it to 20:30, and you're doing that after you sharpen, you're ruining your sharpening. It sounds a little strange, but you're upsizing not only the pixels of the original image, but you're upsizing the strange pixels that were added to sharpen the edges in your photo, ruining your sharpening. It can make your photos look kind of funky. I've had some okay images where I upsized after I sharpened, and then I've had some that look really, really, really bad. So if you're going to upsize your image, you want to sharpen while you're upsizing or after. So while or after. You never want to sharpen your images before you upsize, because your photos can look really bad. So just another little note about that. You really want to make sure you're not doing it beforehand if you're doing a very large jump up from your original photo. There's a question, is it possible to upsize the resolution from 72 to 300? Yes. That is the resolution drop-down menu here in the document size pane. If your resolution is 72, which I changed mine to it, but if you bring a photo in and your resolution is at 72, all you need to do is open up the resolution drop-down menu and just scroll down and choose the one that you want. So let's say we want it at 360. It's going to adjust my photo, and there we go. If you're bringing in a JPEG that was originally 72, I suggest that you only up your resolution to 240. You aren't going to notice a difference on your prints between 240, 300, and 360. I almost 100% guarantee it, like 99% guarantee it. It'll save you a little bit of resolution. Your images aren't going to look quite as strange if you try and upsize to 360. So if you're going from 72 to 240, you're going to be just fine. So that would be my suggestion, but you just do it right here in the resolution drop-down menu. All right, the other question was, can you save presets? Yes, you can. So if you make a whole bunch of changes here, let's reset this really quick. I'm going to change this to 28 by 20. I'm going to change my resolution to 240. I'm going to add a very specific amount of progressive sharpening. And I'm going to protect my whites and my shadows. All right, so I went through and I made this preset 20 by 28, 240 with my specific type of sharpening. To save a preset, you just go up to the preset drop-down menu right at the top of your screen and choose Save Preset. And from here, I like to give it a very obvious name, so I'll call it 20 by 28 inches with progressive sharpening. And I can place it in a category. You're going to have to create a new one if you don't have any presets. So we'll call this Liz's Prints. And then we'll go ahead and click Create. Now, inside the presets library, you'll see underneath there's user presets. So there's on one end, there's user presets. There's Liz's Prints, and there is the 20 by 28 with progressive sharpening. And anytime that I open up another image and I want to use that same size, that same sharpening, that same resolution, I just click on this and add it to my image. If you want to create a preset that is a specific size from the preset drop-down menu, that's when you're going to go to the Manage Custom Sizes here inside the preset drop-down menu in your document size pane. So you go down to Custom and Manage Custom Sizes. And we did that earlier with that 15-inch by 20-inch preset. So there are two different ways to do that. The overall presets, the big ones that include changes from all of the different panes on the right-hand side. And then there's just a size preset from the preset drop-down menu in your document size pane.